Okay, so
At least I was on time though.
there he is,
Hello, gentlemen.
doing the rounds. Thanks very much. You're a good man.
No,
Oh, heck.
but that's why I did this.
He always brings a post dinner mint. Thank you
This is
so
what I
much.
grew up with.
Thank you so much.
You're quite welcome.
It's like something for the crew.
Thank you very much. It's kind.
Well,
Thank you.
Brown envelope.
A little
Money
light
in?
reading to take with you in your suitcase.
Some money in that?
One for you and one for Chris.
We're live.
Yeah, leave that here.
Regional District of Central Cook. You take it with you on the deck. You'll have it on the deck there. What's you reading?
Did you throw a
What are you
beer on
reading
the
there,
centerpiece?
Colin?
Like Santa Claus.
War and Peace from the
They
Regional
say these
District.
things better on gum.
What it's like when you read that shit. Sorry.
Okay, everybody. Welcome. I'd like to start with the Aboriginal Acknowledgement. We would like to acknowledge the land on which we are gathered as the traditional territory of the Tanaha, the Silix and Sinix peoples, and is home to Métis and many diverse Aboriginal persons. We honour the connection to the land and rivers and respect the importance of the environment to our strength as a community. And with that, I'd like to ask if there are any late items. None. Adoption of the agenda, please. Councillor Renwick and Councillor Morrison. Questions or comments? All in favour? Carried. Thanks very much. Adoption of the minutes of the previous meeting of the regular council meeting of October the 12th, 2021. Councillor Morrison, Councillor Woodward. All in favour? Carried. Thank you very much. Recommendations from the Committee of the Whole, meeting, delegations, requests, and the first item up on the agenda is the Sidewalk Cafe fee relaxation. Sebastian, you're going to give us a little bit of an update on this, are you?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I guess this is something that was discussed at the COW meeting in October, and there was a request from the Chamber of Commerce to see if council would be interested in waiving the fees and potentially allowing for patios to expand for 2022. So kind of continuing with the similar model that we've had in 2020 and 2021. So I guess, in reviewing, where the regs are in terms of the public health officer's order and how things are slowly evolving, I think staff recommends that council waive the fees, but only waive the fees on the portion that they are normally allocated. So if they do expand, then the fees should be charged for that section. And in addition to that, so under my sphere of authority, I can grant certain permissions in terms of when these sidewalks can be expanded. So what I'm recommending, and I'm happy to hear if council agrees with it or not, that between May 1st, which is the start of the season, we try to go a bit earlier if conditions permit, to June 30th, that we wouldn't allow temporary expansions during that period. We would allow the expansions between July 1st and September 30th. The main reason is that, we want these patios to be full. The last thing we want is to have patios occupy a lot of our public space, which is in this case on-street parking, and they are not necessarily full. So the idea was that July, August, and September are naturally busier months for tourism reason, and typically the weather is better. And then, so at the front end and the back end, if the expansions wouldn't be permitted, so they would still be allowed to have their regular patios, but then as the season transition, they could modify that. So you know, this is based on some of my observations, and I think others may have observed that as well. I mean, you look at the month of October, some of these patios occupy 2-3 parking stalls, and there's very few people on it. So I think, you know, if they choose to keep them there, that's fine. But I think we shouldn't allow the extra large ones during those kind of shoulder season. During shoulder season. So,
So so in
Yeah.
a nutshell on that piece, Sebastian, we're allowing an extension of the existing patio to start with, and then beyond that is the expansion of that existing patio, right?
no, we're allowing, you know, patios as they would normally be regulated. So 2000,
Yeah.
pre-COVID, yes. So, for example, what we've changed at the beginning of COVID to help out these businesses was that they could expand on an additional parking stall, provided that the neighboring or the adjacent business owner was in agreement. So, what we're recommending here is that they're allowed their typical 1 parking stall or 3 parking stall, depending on the configuration of it. But if they want to expand beyond that, that would be allowed during July, August, and September, and they would have to pay fees for that section.
Thank you. Do you want to stop? I did. So we stopped you there, so it sounds like there's a couple of questions on that first
Sure,
piece.
yeah.
So Councillor Renwick and then Councillor Woodward.
Sebastian, so I'm having a problem with this because, as an example, we have, let's use the Main Street Diner, who's always had a patio and always paid for it. And then last year we allowed him, with permission from his neighbor, to expand that.
Yeah.
So he has to pay for that one. But 2 blocks down at Broken Hill, they never had a patio, but he gets his for free. Never had a patio, never paid for a patio.
So if we use those 2 examples, I mean, it's a fair playing game, I think, because so Main Street would not pay for the one they have in front of their business, but
Right.
if they want to expand
Right,
in front of the adjacent business, they would pay for that section.
right.
For example, Broken Hill would not pay for the section that is in front of their business, so that 1 parking stall. So same as Main Street. But if they wanted to expand to the next parking stall over and they had permission from that property owner, they would pay for that section.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's good. Follow up?
Yep.
So how many are we talking about? Do you know? Do you have that number?
How many patios?
How many businesses expanded beyond their normal patio footprint?
Yeah. I did have the numbers. I don't have them in front of me.
It wasn't that many.
Wasn't that many. Yeah, I would say maybe a third of the patios expanded. Yeah, maybe less, but not that many. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Councillor Woodward.
Thank you, Mayor. So I was wondering, do businesses have to give development services prior warning that they're going to expand? Or is it just kind of a wait and see? So if they gave us prior warning, we could kind of maybe have more planning involved in that process, right?
Yeah. So the patios are regulated by bylaw. So there are certain rules that guide it. There's certain flexibility and discretionary power in the bylaw, which is the one where we can expand provided everything else is okay and the neighbor is in agreement with it. So every year they have to renew their permit or apply for a new permit. So there is a process every year where we verify their application. So, you know, we have a general sense of who will want to expand. It'll be the same as last year. So, I mean, everything is governed by bylaw and it's a year-to-year process. So I think that's probably the best way to gauge, to make sure the process is fair, is that everyone can plan based on the bylaw.
Right.
Yeah, and it's been fairly consistent. I would say, roughly 20 establishments are having a patio, and it takes somewhere between 30 to 35 parking stalls.
Thank you.
Okay, go ahead, Sebastian. Nicole. Go ahead.
Thanks, Mayor. I have two questions.
Go ahead, yeah.
The first is around, I heard a base assumption that we don't want large patios in the shoulder season. That's parking is valued higher, I guess, is the assumption there, right? Because this is a trade-off between parking and, in a sense, in terms
In a
of what
sense,
people
yeah.
want access to.
Yeah.
Right, beyond money and all of that.
I think
Is that a good assumption to make?
I think the other piece is our observation they weren't being utilized. That's the biggest thing. I think what we're saying is those larger.
I wonder if they invest, if they know they can have those large patios again, if they invested in a bit of heating and other options.
Well, we're really clear that these were not
an option.
they weren't ongoing approval. These were
I
a
understand.
COVID approval, and I think
That
you'd have
rolls into
to.
my second question.
Yeah, okay.
Thanks, which
Yeah.
is, can this be a permanent change? I'm actually pro letting people decide when they want to have their patios and how big they are, if they negotiate and they pay. I'm not interested in rolling free patio space forward at this point. And that's just where I'm sitting in terms of my thinking around this.
Yeah, I mean, the rules pre-COVID essentially said you can take your frontage, provided you leave a certain amount of sidewalk space to ensure that there's proper circulation. So then you can use the sidewalk space for a certain fee, and then if you want to go into the on street and take up a parking stall, then there is an extra fee to that, which is what most patios do because there's just not enough room on the sidewalk per se, unless you have the benefit of being located in front of an amenity space. So they had a bit more flexibility. So what we said is you could have one parallel parking stall or 3 angled, and the idea was it roughly occupies the same space. And in the bylaw, we specified that you could have a larger patio, provided the adjacent business was okay with it, but you could not expand your patio over additional parking. That's what we changed for COVID. We said
the temporary
we
piece.
used a bit of gray wording, saying under extraordinary circumstances, Director of Development Services may accept the larger patio. And that's essentially been the change. So the idea would be, hopefully, we go back to normal, and we don't have to apply that that clause. If at that time council wants to explore having larger patios, I think then there's a new conversation that needs to happen, because then these patios would be built and they're fairly expensive. So they would need to know that there's a guarantee that on a year-to-year basis, they can have that larger space. Whereas right now, we've allowed them to do really like temporary investments,
Gotcha.
with the caveat that once we're back to normal, which we thought happened 2 years ago, they would go back to their regular size. So I think if we are to go there, I think there's just another conversation to be had with all the business owners and the community in terms of how do we allocate that public space fairly and efficiently.
Thanks.
Councillor Page.
I'm comfortable with where we're going with this for the 2022 year, but I want to pick up on what Councillor Charwood has said. For me, I think what was a little bit magical about what we did on Baker Street was the temporary nature. When we kind of think of how we had got here with the sidewalk cafe bylaw amendment changes, just the idea of furniture that comes out that that's kind of in front of your business, that invites people to be on the street in front of a business and out there. And that those temporary patios, they really do feel like a place that just, it's not a built environment. It's not the indoors, outdoors. It's just a lot more diversity going out on the street. And I think as we get into 2023, God willing, some of us are still around the table, I would want to steer staff in that direction of how can we keep allowing people to have minuscule investments, allowing, what we're kind of seeing now, but maybe, a little bit more planned and formal, but, maybe not so much with the decking, maybe not so much with like the really rigid structures that are outside that are huge investments, because it's kind of, you walk down parts of the street, it's very human scale. It's very like, they're right there. You're not getting behind a fence that has glass paneling. There's not a roof over top.
Yeah.
It really just feels like the street's alive, not the restaurants exploding. The interaction just feels more, I don't know how to exactly describe it, but it feels right. And I hope we would push for those smaller pieces.
Yeah, and I think, it's worth highlighting that some businesses have done a wonderful job with very little investment. I think they really, with a bit of paint and some hanging some lights and some planters, I thought they did a really good job. You get some nice photos of what can be achieved on a fairly limited budget.
Councillor Renwick?
I think we did a great job 2 years ago on this as well. What I see here is, I'm not in favor of this. The restaurant sector is one that has been slammed since day one, and they're still reeling. And this isn't about the money. It's not a large portion. It's not a large piece of money. It's just about what we can do in our way to help these people out, and to say, yeah, but we're going to charge you for that extra one this year. It just doesn't sit right with me. I think we should just stay with where we were and give them this one more time, and then revisit the whole bylaw if need be. But I'm just sorry. I can't be in favor of this.
So thanks, Councillor Renwick. So we'll let Sebastian get through here.
I'm done.
You're done, okay.
Yeah.
It's because to have that discussion, or what Councillor Page brought up, we need to have a motion on the floor to make
We do.
to go in that direction. So if somebody wants to make a motion to approve or deny what's on the table or something alternative to that, go ahead and do it now, and then we can have a discussion.
I'll move.
So you're moving the recommendation, there's two pieces to this now.
Yep.
That council passed the first and second reading of the fees and charges amendment bylaw, number 3538 2021. So that's a mover and a seconder, and then we can have discussion. Do we have a seconder?
I'll second it so I can talk.
For the. So you're the mover, do you need to speak,
Nope.
Councillor Morrison as a seconder?
So thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have just a question, or I think maybe like a concern that follows up to Councillor Renwick's. Just in terms of breaking, I have some difficulty with breaking this up, and then if it's all a matter of what it costs me for one extra parking spot, which I don't know what that is. I don't know that I'm so bothered by that, but one of the things that we didn't want it to look like, we didn't want to drive down Baker Street and have this look like it was, I don't know, the five or dime, or that a hurricane just went through. And my concern here is that we let people build X for the last 2 summers. Now we want them to build Y, and maybe they will decide that they want to go back to X. And some people sort of invested and made a design based on X. So, like, basically, if I realize that June, it rains. There's not that many people that want to sit outside in June, but for me, the concept is, if I've designed my patio so that it looks nice and that we can appreciate something looking nice when we're walking down Baker Street, whether or not we're going to that patio or not, that I would like to see that the work they've put into doing that design that has now worked for 2 years to actually stay in place. So the kind of idea of patio X for so long, then patio Y after that, to me is problematic. And I would hear pushback probably from the people that have these patios. So that's my concern. So I have a difficulty with the splitting up of the time.
Maybe just to clarify that, I guess the only businesses that installed what we would call like temporary patios, or at least a temporary portion, is the portion that was expanded because we've allowed it during COVID. So the businesses that have fully built temporary patios are the ones that were new, that hadn't had a patio approved under the previous version of the bylaw. So once we go back, and they're already applying to get their real permanent year-to-year patio, which is within the size that would typically be permitted. So we have received a few of those applications to be ready for next year. So I guess that was pretty clear, and everybody's aware of that, and that's why that the expanded piece to these patio was always temporary, because I was clear that if you're going to add that second, let's use Main Street Diner, he's got his permanent or his typical patio setup, and the setup next door was just a couple of 4x4s painted with some picnic tables, because they were aware that we won't necessarily allow those on the long term. So I guess I think that was covered and that was clear. So what is being proposed here is not changing anything. We're basically saying you can continue with your temporary patio or whatever setup you had in the last 2 years if you want. We're giving you
That's at their discretion.
Yeah, we're giving you another year. If you want to transition to more permanent patio, you can do that as well. So we're giving the option. So I think we're not setting anyone up in terms of them investing on a very large patio, because we wouldn't allow that, knowing that the rules don't typically permit that. That makes any sense.
And I think, Sebastian, you're saying, the ability to expand this year was the same as in the past. So,
correct.
So the concern around can these, be smaller and expand that has happened, and you're confident that can still happen.
Yeah, and the idea about the fee for the extra space that you want to occupy, it's more so to make sure that whoever is doing it knows that there is a need for that space, because I don't think anyone benefits from having 4 or 5 tables occupy a parking spot and nobody uses it. So we're hoping that fee, which shouldn't be very high, is there to, on one end is discourage those that have big patios that don't need it, and those that really need the extra space will be, I think, willing to pay for that space because they know it's going to be utilized.
And profit from it, yeah.
Yeah, I think we're not helping anyone by just
Giving it away.
And I think last year was the first season, I think a few expanded and it seemed to work really well. I think last year a couple more expanded, and there's a few that you'd walk by and the regular area of the patio was occupied, but the second portion was done. I happy to say it wasn't, they didn't put a lot of time and effort into it because it was free. So why wouldn't they take it anyways? So we're trying to discourage that. So if they want to use it, we're happy to allow them to use it, but it's got to be used for a purpose.
And I think,
Point.
can I just add to that, when I was, and I think both of us were part of those calls with that, the restaurant and the food and beverage, there was also that they wanted to see, all those patios being utilized as much as possible, that we didn't, some were, completely full and others were all empty. So I think we're trying to manage, that to a certain extent, that, whatever policy is fair to everyone. And you have to remember that some people have patios on their own private land as well, and they're paying 100% of the cost to, develop and have that land and pay taxes on that land, et cetera. So we're really trying to find a balance, and I agree with Sebastian, that little bit of additional fee, then you'll think, do I really need that? And we're really looking at those very busy parts of the year that, that should pay for it. So it's not so much the fees, it's how it helps self-regulate, I guess.
So 80% of the people that were surveyed liked the patio idea.
Yeah, I think in general, it's
General, it was
patios
very
are
well
positive for sure.
Accepted, yeah. But that was one concern that I did hear, Kevin, was that, when a place expanded their patio, it meant the guy down the street had less people on his. Where you had the smaller patio, people were shared out among all of the smaller patios, whereas some of the bigger ones attracted, people
Yeah.
just went in, but overall, I think it was very well received. And
Absolutely.
and the key point here, I think, in the presentation is that the public consultation piece was done, at least with the business community. And of course, our responsibility is to pay attention to what people are saying as well as what we see around this table also. So I think it's a fair sort of, I think it's a pretty fair proposal that you've come up with. Because we're still, whether we like it or not, we're still in somewhat in the pandemic situation. And we never know from month to month how it's going to shift back and forth. And this was, this all came together because of the 25-point action plan that we put in place in the first place. And
Yeah.
Nicole?
Just a question around the idea that, I guess my question to you is, if we didn't pay their fees, would some of these patios disappear? I know it's a small amount of money, but I guess part of the emotional response maybe behind this question is this fair when I know there are other kinds of businesses who are on Baker Street who are struggling and they're not seeing any benefits? And so I got feedback around how is that fairness too, right? Like, and is that the right tool to be supporting these businesses, or is a small amount of money, $45,000 that we could use on a different project,
I know.
that our best
Yeah,
offer?
It's a good question. I know we've had these check-ins with the Chamber of Commerce and their membership a few times, and I think we were talking to retailers that were saying, and it doesn't mean that everybody agrees on it, but we've heard from more than one retailer saying that this is great. It brings people downtown. It's vibrancy. We lose a parking stall. I mean, one or two parking stall. That gets.
I'm okay with the parking
Yeah.
stalls going.
But I think it's all about, and the idea when we brought this forward is that, we have a very vibrant downtown, and during COVID, with all the uncertainty, we were worried that, it could cause some real issues for our downtown businesses. So the idea was let's try and keep people coming downtown. And at the time, the safe environment was outdoor dining. So I think we turn, that into a positive. And I think, you talk to the retailers and some of the retailers, again, I don't want to say that this is everyone, but there was quite a few retailers saying that they had some really good years and because we had fairly good tourism seasons. And I think, the patios really help with the vibrancy. So I think that is something, because it's allocating our public land, that was something that was kind of a low-hanging fruit that we could offer as as something to help the overall downtown and make sure that it stays vibrant, and that that businesses survive. So that recreating this downtown would be very difficult. So I think it was really important that we do whatever we can to get people downtown walking.
All right, Councillor Renwick, you had.
Yeah. If I'm not mistaken, after year 2020, I think in last year, we went to the expansion because we were under pandemic and you couldn't go inside. So, and the mayor just said it, there's some uncertainty. I think we all know that there's some anti-vaxxers and maskers around that could cause a problem. We don't know what's going to happen month to month. Therefore, that would be another reason to leave it be another year. And sorry, but I just want to correct something. They had some great months downtown. They didn't have great years.
Sorry, you're right.
Yeah,
Thank you.
that's right.
Can I just add, this isn't, if things don't improve this summer, we can revisit this, right? So that this isn't, you know, you make this decision and you can't revisit it. If we see, you know, the regulations get stricter again, you have to be outside, all those sorts of things, you know, I think you can revisit that again. And just in terms of Councillor Charlwood, it wasn't just the patios. We waived all sidewalk rental fees, you know, the sandwich board fees, all those things. So we did, you know, this was more comprehensive than just for the food and beverage. And I'm not sure where we're at with those fees or if they're being addressed or not, but that was part of that larger package. And we had other programs such as, you know, helping businesses, you know, digitize their businesses and do all that. So we did have a pretty comprehensive package for our businesses. So if that comes up, it wasn't just these patios.
Okay, so the motion was the council pass the first and second reading of the Fees and Charges Amendment Bylaw number 3538 2021. And if there are no further questions, I'll call for the vote. All in favor? Opposed? You in favor or opposed?
I'm in favor.
Okay, carried. Number two, that council pass the third reading of Fees and Charges Amendment Bylaw number 3538 2021. Mover and the seconder, please. Councillor Charlwood. Second, Councillor Page. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Onward and upward.
And as I said, we will, you know, keep an eye on this, and, you know, if things change that this policy should change, we'll bring that back. Or you hear that on the street.
Sebastian, one other thing, it's something that we should potentially talk to the province about going forward, because there are regulations around the liquor bylaws and so forth. But I find our patio, our policies around patios in British Columbia very antiquated. If you go to Europe, basically what you'll have is table and 4 chairs on the sidewalk, and if the guy gets 4 more customers without 4 more chairs and another table, and if he gets, you know, 8 more, he'll put out another table and 4 more chairs. So, you know, he has a certain space that he can fill without these, like, for the lack of a better word, bonanza patio things that are a total hodgepodge from one end of town to the other. Nobody seems to know what the regulations are, you know. They're supposed to be there for safety, maybe, but are they safe? And they're there for the liquor bylaws, because you have to be supposedly in an enclosed area. And I just wish we'd go to the more of the European style, where you can expand and contract your patio depending on the volume and basis that business that you have on the day. And, you know, you're not tying up parking spaces or when they're not needed, you know. And there is times downtown last year where we had patios sitting completely empty. And in fact, some of the loading zones are very difficult to even get a truck pulled in because of them. So it might be something we want to put on council's radar for, you know, a conversation with the minister to look at the liquor bylaws and more flexibility around what a patio could look like.
Yeah, and a big part, I think, is the built form. Like, you know, some of the patios are on roads that are really steep. So, but Baker, you know, you in Europe, the sidewalks are very wide, so it's kind of easy to take that. So when we redesign Baker, we'll definitely.
Exactly, it's just something to keep in mind. Maybe it's a
absolutely.
different way. Thank you very much, Sebastian.
Thanks,
I appreciate
Sebastian.
your time. Okay, next up is another development services bylaw, and it's development services proposing to repeal the land development application procedures bylaw 3243/2012 and replace it with a new development application procedures bylaw. The current application process bylaw is outdated, no longer accurately reflects how the city processes applications. And Natalie, you're here to give us a little bit of background on this and help us hopefully better understand, but go ahead.
Okay, great. Yeah, I think you basically kind of summed it up in the summary there, which is that the old bylaws from 2012 and hasn't been updated in about 10 years. And so staff took some time to review it. did some best practice research, had a legal review. And so we've just basically taken the 2012 bylaw and made it simpler and easier to read by taking out some redundancies. And also we've suggested a few sort of more significant changes that I've kind of outlined in this report, and then some minor ones. But for the most part, it's very similar to the 2012 bylaw. So a couple of the bigger changes is that we've clarified for potential applicants what's required for public information sessions. So that's outlined in the bylaw. Before it was just one line. Something else we've added in there is once a development variance permit or a development permit has been issued, an applicant has 2 years to substantially start construction, but the Local Government Act does not have a definition of that term, and so we're defining it so applicants are clear and staff is clear on what that means. We're also proposing some more minor changes. When a development sign has to be posted on someone's property, it just gives the applicant and staff a bit more time to review the application and come up with appropriate language. We're also clarifying that once a development variance permit is issued, their 2-year time frame to substantially start construction is from the date of the council resolution, not when the permit is issued, because sometimes those differ. And then lastly, we're just kind of adding that at council's discretion, they could require further public consultation for any of the applications in the bylaw.
Thanks, Natalie. So there's a little piece in here about our ability to follow up on these applications as well, and you're going to address that somehow, right? Like if you have a 2-year window, the check, when will we have a check-in as an example to see if a person did commit within that 2-year period?
Well, the check-in.
Talk about like what would be a substantial start?
Substantially started construction we've defined it as you would need to apply for a building permit. So that would be one of the check-ins that we would get notified that you applied for a building permit, and that the other is that you've constructed a foundation. And if there's no foundation, then it would be left to the discretion of the Director of Development Services to determine. And so that gives people a bit more clarity on what's required. And so that's how we would check in. And once they've done those couple things, then their permit is good and won't lapse anymore.
Right.
Yeah.
So on that note then, Natalie, if you don't mind, as an example, if you did put in, say, the footings and started your foundation, etc., there is a time period where you could leave those exposed as well. Like, I mean, the building inspector would have to, there'd have to be a time period when you'd start construction beyond that, because if they're left too long, they have to be dug out of the ground again.
Yeah, that's a good point. The building permits are good for 2 years.
Yeah.
And they can renew them.
Okay.
But in terms of the development variance permit, I feel like their conditions would be met if they met those criteria. And then the rest of the process would be with the building inspector to make sure that, he doesn't have concerns with the construction and that they're kind of completing the process.
Meeting the code, okay.
Yeah. I don't know of any examples in the city where we've actually had an issue with that, but it could happen. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, so in front of us, thanks Natalie for that clarification. That the Development Application Procedures Bylaw number 3526/2021 be introduced and read first and second time by title only.
Moved.
Councillor Morrison, second by Councillor Renwick. Any questions or comments? I had one more, I thought it might have come up, but that was on A in your preamble here, we have 1, 2, 3, and then A says council may at its sole discretion require further public consultation. And that's probably fair to a point, but is it fair to the developer in the long run, if you understand what I mean?
Mm-hmm. You're right. It was a condition that was already in the liquor processing application and the cannabis processing application, so it was already in there. And we were just proposing that it could be applied to the entire bylaw if council deemed it was necessary before they made a decision. And, typically, developers, it's in their best interest to do an appropriate amount of public engagement based on the scale and complexity of the application at hand. But it does give council some flexibility to require it after they've already done some. But yes, at least it's in the bylaw, and they would have an idea that it would be a possibility. So it's kind of clearly written down. I think council could ask for more public engagement, whether it's in the bylaw or not, too. So that's something.
So is there a stage where that would happen then, where it could or couldn't happen, as an example? Because there is a number of stages to an application, right?
It would have to be, in my opinion, before a public hearing.
So should that be detailed in here, Kevin, or not? Sarah?
Well, we could look at it. I think practically that's the advice that we would give a developer. I think Granite Point development's a good example of that.
Yeah.
When when our staff is getting feedback that, this is, there's quite a few questions, there's more information needed, to not have a public hearing that, that is not informed. We work with the developer to say it's in your interest to, to have this, and in fact, that case, we led that one to make sure that the public understood what that development was about and answered all their questions, and then when it came to public hearing, you didn't have all that
Taken care of.
energy and emotion at the public hearing. They were more fact-based, so.
I agree with the idea. Just wondering if there's a certain stage where you'd say, okay, it was done, and then let council make the decision based on what was done, rather than sending it back to for another round of.
It is kind of vague in the bylaw and just says before a decision is made.
Yeah.
And I guess that gives council a bit of flexibility to, I guess you could request it after the public hearing and not bring it to,
Third reading or whatever.
Yeah, you're right. You'd have to bring it back again for public hearing. Yeah, but you could, that's why, in my opinion, I think it would best be done before the public hearing.
Yeah.
But again, I mean,
It's just that, if you create uncertainty around an application, whether it be good, bad, or indifferent, one of the things we have prided ourselves on a number of years is we create a certain amount of certainty in your department. Not to say we approve everything that comes before us, but at the same time, there is a point where we've done, due diligence is done, and maybe there should be a stage where due diligence is done, and then council either approves or denies it.
Okay, so we're at, I guess we could take this to second reading and look at that piece of it.
yeah, just put a clarifying line in there.
Yeah.
Okay, yep, we can do that.
Councillor Charwood?
In the same vein, I know we kind of came at it in a different way, but I just wanted to check in on 2C, of the substantial changes proposed.
Yep.
And so I get the, whether foundation's built or not, that's pretty clear. And if the goal here is clarity, especially to developers, as the mayor's talking about, then in C, there's no clarity on what we would consider substantially. How much of that really matters? How many situations are we looking at for that? And is there a possibility for frustration in that particular place?
I don't anticipate a ton of frustration. This question hasn't really come up much. Yeah, so it's just, I guess it would be hard to put in enough parameters to cover every situation.
Right, fair
Right, and so, but I'm guessing if it doesn't have a foundation, maybe it's smaller in scale, and so it might be easier to determine.
Totally,
That's kind of my
But is
take
there
on
even
it.
like a benchmark, you're 30% along the way or something like that? Would that be helpful or not?
I don't know.
Because
Yeah,
it's not really an issue for you guys yet.
Yeah, potentially on this one, we could, see how it's working. And if there's any concern that it's not meeting the needs of the community or that people are feeling that it's too vague, then we can certainly bring it back if that would be acceptable to council, just as an idea. Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. So then we'll, if it's okay with council, we'll call for the vote on number 1, and you'll look at that wording around timing there for rejection or approval. Okay, all in favor?
Did you mean number 2?
No, it's
Recommendation 1.
recommendation
hold
1,
on
and then we leave
recommendation.
number 2
Oh, I'm
to the
sorry.
next meeting.
Sorry with you. Okay, thanks.
All in favor? Thank you. Thanks very much. Thanks, Natalie. Good job.
Thank you.
Thanks, Natalie.
So we should have probably changed up the agenda a little bit here, because we have the approving officer appointments, and we have Natalie here and Sebastian here. Would it be okay with council if we move those up? Sorry, Scott. We have you in the middle. Hydro and UBCM in the middle there.
He's
so-
used to it, though.
Pardon?
Scott's used to it.
You'll come back next meeting. Yeah, we can do the.
Is that okay with council?
Want to do
Absolutely.
10B next?
Yeah,
Yeah.
We need a motion for that?
yeah. 10, appointment of approving officer B. Yeah.
Can we get can I just have a resolution?
I'll move that.
Yeah, to
Yeah,
change the
so-
agenda.
Moved by councillor Morrison, second by councillor Charwood. All in favour? Carried. Sorry, Natalie, I didn't know you were going to be here tonight. Otherwise, we would have flipped it around at the beginning, and so. Okay, on that note, then, Section 77 of the Land Act requires the council appoint a person as the approving officer for the city. Up until her recent departure, Pam Moreau, the previous Director of Development Service, held the designation. Accordingly, at this time, staff are recommending that Sebastian Nacandia, the city new Director of Development Service, be appointed an approving officer for the senior planner, and that Natalie
Andrzejczyk.
Yeah, be appointed the deputy approving officer.
Moved.
And moved by councillor Morrison
I'll second.
and seconded by councillor Charwood. That's for both. Is it okay to do both together?
Yep, they're together.
Do them separate?
No, together.
Both together, okay. Any questions or comments? Hearing none. All in favor? Thanks very much to both of you. We're
The
happy.
crowns?
The transition's gone really well from Pam to
crowns.
you to
Comes with a
Natalie.
pay raise, right?
We get a raise.
Yeah.
Yes.
Raise. He's gonna take a
It
raise
doesn't
now,
come
right?
with any extra money, but, you know,
But
lots
the
of
crowns.
compliments. And
Crowns are made of gold.
That's okay.
Anyway, thanks very much, and
Here's got a certificate.
thanks a lot to all. So just before you go, I just want to say thanks to all our staff, because, you know, we have a lot of great young people working for us, and our future looks very bright in our organization. And that includes you too, Scott. So thank you both very much. We really appreciate your good work.
Thank you.
All right, back on the agenda again. And we're back to the hydro rate bylaw. And on September 27, 2021, and October 18, 2021, Nelson Hydro presented to council with regards to the 2022 budget and the corresponding need for a modest annual general rate increase. And in front of us today, Scott, you're here to give us a little bit of background into that and to help council get some clarity if needed. And thank you very much for coming tonight. So you're up.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. As you indicated, council should be aware that Nelson Hydro has recommended and council has directed Nelson Hydro to move forward with a 2.5% general rate increase. Nelson Hydro has also applied to the British Columbia Utilities Commission for that same 2.5% rate increase. This increase is in reaction to a 3.46% rate increase from Fortress BC, which is our primary wholesale power supplier that represents 50% of our operations budget. And we are also looking at inflationary increases with general operational expenses, as well as increase in our vegetation management budget and our storm response budgets.
Okay, so in front of council, there's 4 recommendations for your consideration, and each one of them have to be done separately. And we can throw one of them on the floor, and if you have any more questions for Scott, then we can deal with them at that time. Moved by councillor Renwick, second by councillor Morrison, that the Corporation of the City of Nelson Hydro Services Bylaw Rural Rates Amendment Number 3536/2021 be introduced and read a first and second time by title only. Now, if you have any further questions of Scott, now is your time to ask him or forever hold your peace. Okay, all in favor? Carried. Thank you.
Thank you very
And the
much.
Corporation of the City of Nelson Hydro Services Bylaw Rural Rates Amendment Number 3536/2021 be read a third time by title only. Mover and a seconder, please. Councillor Woodward, Councillor Renwick, all in favor? Thank you. Number 3, the Corporation of the City of Nelson Hydro Services Bylaw Urban Rates, that's urban rates this time. Amendment number 3537/2021 be introduced and read a first and second time by title only. Mover and seconder, please. Councillor Morrison, Councillor Renwick, all in favor? Thank you. You're going to have tired arms by the time this is over.
Oh, just put your hand up.
I'll move third reading.
Moved by Councillor Morrison, second by Councillor Charlwood. All in favor? Carried.
And
Thank you very
just
much.
want to remind everybody, Mr. Mayor, that on the November the 25th, that the Hydro team will be holding its annual open house. So if you
7
missed
o'clock.
any of the iterations beforehand, here's your third time the trifecta of getting to hear everything you ever wanted to know about hydro, but we're afraid to ask. So
Exactly.
another opportunity.
Thank you very much, Councillor Morrison, for that plug.
Thank you.
And, yeah, hoping to get as many of of our customers to join that as possible.
Thanks, Scott, and the lights look fantastic on Vernon.
Great.
Good. Thank you very much. All right, take care.
Thanks, Scott.
Okay, next up is the UBCM CRI FireSmart Community Funding and Support Grant application. As part of the UBCM's Community Resilience Investment Program, the provincial initiative focuses on reducing the risk of impact of wildfire. Nelson Fire and Rescue Service is requesting council resolution to support a grant application for $149,000.
Move.
Moved by Councillor Woodward and second by Councillor Charlwood. Whereas council,
Mr. Mayor, can I just highlight a few things? I think it's, the public would like to know what's.
yeah, we'll get there.
Invest-
Just let me, while we're moving a seconding.
Oh, okay.
And
I
then
thought
we
we did
get
that.
to a bit of clarity there, Kevin. Thank you. Whereas council supports Nelson Fire and Rescue Services plan to continue the important FireSmart activities of wildfire fuel reduction and minimize the potential to impact from wildfires and access alternative water supply for fire flow. Therefore, be resolved that Nelson Fire and Rescue Service be authorized to apply for $150,000 in grant funding under UBCM 2022 Community Resilience Investment Program, and further that Nelson Fire and Rescue staff be responsible for the overall grant management. Kevin.
Okay. We just had the mover and seconder before the resolution. That's what threw me off. Okay, so it's partly in the resolution, but there's some exciting initiatives led by our Nelson Fire and Rescue or Emergency Management group. Obviously, the FireSmart continues to work with individuals. We're looking for the ability to do some rebate for some of that cost that somebody might incur to encourage that. There is a new sort of updated way to write a community wildfire plan. So it's called the Community Wildfire Resiliency Plan. So that will be that will update that 2015 plan that we have. And I think with the previous number of wildfire seasons that we've had since 2015, it's obviously important work for us to, do that. And I think it's also important to recognize the amount of fuel mitigation work that we've done over that period of time as well. Again, the other piece that we're looking at doing it as part of this, and this is in conjunction with the work that Colin Innes's group is doing around our water system. Certainly there's been media out there, some real world examples of what rooftop sprinklers can do to protect your homes with our drought conditions and limited supply of water, we want to look at, what kind of flows do we need if we deployed rooftop sprinklers as part of that protecting our community. And we have secured some rights of way to potentially bring water up from the lake to our reservoir and utilize that in a emergent basis. So this will allow us to advance that work and really understand whether that can be part of one of the tools that we can deploy in an emergent situation. And then finally, continue with that fuel mitigation work around our Mountain Station Reservoir, and that's on two fronts, both from that flood or potential breach of our dam, and the regulator has asked us to remove that vegetation around that structure to reduce the risk of that happening, and obviously from a wildfire perspective, making sure that we're protecting our water supply. So there's a lot in this grant, and there's a lot of work been done.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Kevin, for your good work. We got clarity on that. So any further questions or comments? Cool.
So I love that there's a rebate offer, but I wonder if like EcoSave, to get any true uptake, I'd love to see that amount of rebate increase. Is there any advocacy opportunities through this work for us to be asking for support on that front?
So it couldn't go through EcoSave because it's not an improvement to your property per se.
That was we had a previous conversation around needing more support there for people to get larger rebates.
Right.
For EcoSave, I said it's just analogous.
Oh, I didn't know.
I didn't mean
okay.
for them to be
okay. Well, I think this is the first attempt to see whether through the Ubcm program that can be funded at this level, and I think this will be a good pilot. How much does $500 move people to do those changes? And I think if we see success and we also see barriers still, then I think we'll be in a better position in the future to say, we've tried this at this level. We've had some success on this type of home, but on those larger properties that need more work, this hasn't moved those people, and a larger rebate might be appropriate.
Go ahead.
Thanks, Mayor. So this program's been running though in the region for a few years, so there's not enough information yet on how much uptake there is on the program?
I think in the city, we've had a fair amount of success. We don't tend to have, those larger rural properties with a lot more work that has to be done in those properties. So I think we've had, pretty good success in the city on our size of parcels.
So then I misunderstood. So we want to wait to see whether the 500 is enough. You're saying maybe
within the city.
It looks like it may be enough, is what you're saying.
That's what I'm hearing from our fire chief. Yeah.
Great. Thanks.
Councillor Woodward.
This is just more of a comment. I think these kind of programs are super vital for our town, considering our town is, I think, for a town of 10,000, #1 wildfire risk in BC. If I remember that fact.
One of the higher for sure. Yeah.
It's one of the higher for sure.
Number one, highest fuel load.
And the fuel load, yes.
Highest fuel load.
Highest fuel load. So, and the work that's been being done in the last 5 years around the edges of this town is really, it gives me a lot of confidence that we can just keep on working on this, that we'll get to a point where we've done our due diligence, we've done what we can, we've planned, we've prepared, and I'm kind of proud of our town for all the people that have been involved, and it's a huge amount of not just the city of Nelson, but the Park Service and private companies and private land owners.
Parks, Regional District.
Regional District.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of people coming together to really try to protect our town, and it's wonderful. So I'm really, this is exciting to continue that work. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, with that, I'm going to call the question, and all in favor? Thank you. Carried. We did the approving officer. Okay, on the change date for the committee of the whole meeting, November 20th, council approved the 2021 council meeting calendar, which provides that the December committee of the whole meeting is to take place on December 21st, 2021. Council is now requesting to pass the resolution changing the date of the cow meeting to December the 14th, because Santa Claus is coming to town and we just didn't want to be doing anything bad at council here, so we'd be in the bad books. Moved by Councillor Renwick, second by Councillor Woodward. All in favor? Questions?
No,
No? Okay. I thought it was pretty simple.
It was.
Yeah. I wasn't expecting any questions on that, 'cause we had already dealt with it. So that means we're changing the calendar now, right?
In about
That's the new
Yeah.
calendar.
That's for 2021 calendar.
Yeah,
This is
so
the
we're
22.
changing the calendar because of that, is that right?
The 2021.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the-
2021,
yes.
okay. All right, up next is the, sorry,
Meeting calendar.
2022 council calendar. The proposed council and committee of the whole meeting schedule for 2022, as well as the acting mayor schedule, is presented to council for approval. And if Councillor Morrison has no cruises planned, this probably will work just fine.
Yeah, there's just one day I
So,
see
yeah,
that
there
I
you
didn't
go.
miss. There you go.
Can we have a mover and a
Guys, you
seconder
probably
to start
won't
off
be
with?
this
Moved by
meeting.
Councillor Page, second by Councillor Charwood.
I just have a,
Okay, question from the mover. Anything from the second?
No, I'm good.
Okay. Mover, then Councillor Morrison, then Councillor Woodward.
So my question is about the Tuesdays. We moved this last year. We've
Yeah.
had a year under our belt. How has that worked for staff as far as scheduling? How is it laying out for this next year? Is that a change we want to keep going forward? It's obviously in this calendar,
It's like
so.
something like curling, but other than that, I think it's.
Well,
Great.
it seems that almost every month now has got a Monday of some kind off, right?
Yeah,
Like
that's right.
a long weekend, so I think, for me, I think it worked very well.
It goes really well with that 4-day work week.
Yeah. Yeah, before we do, it's a real thing.
And for council, because we have felt it's been positive that having a bit more time and then having almost that business day beforehand has
I
been
think that's been really
positive, I think, for
Very,
staff.
very
And
valuable.
yeah,
Yeah.
excellent.
Yeah,
We're good.
all right, any other, Councillor Woodward?
Yeah, I just-
Councillor Morrison, you had the,
Oh, actually, it wasn't Councillor Morrison?
Janice, you
Sorry?
wanna?
Did
No,
you
I
have-
didn't have, no,
Okay.
go right ahead.
So AKBLG, FCM, UBCM, obviously,
Maybe,
maybe.
yeah.
Should have got that first year.
But I guess
really?
they've been virtual, and so they would continue in that respect.
Potentially, yeah.
Okay. But AKBLG in 2022 is supposed to be hosted by Nelson, is that
Right.
correct? I just wanted to put that out to the public, if anybody's
Oh, okay,
listening.
yeah.
That's going to be an exciting
Thank you.
event. Hopefully it'll happen.
Yeah, I hope so, yeah, that'd be nice. Be a good first step, wouldn't it?
It would be wonderful.
Yeah, thank you.
At some point, we'll have to pick the two counselors that go to the FCM if it's actually
Right.
live and not Memorex this year.
Okay, all in favor? Carried. Yeah, we might actually, everybody might be able to go, because nobody went to any of them. Right. Next up is the,
Oh, I went
Did
to.
you over budget this year because of all that?
Budget savings, we saved.
oh, we got it in here in this budget. so-
Kept
Taxing up,
taxation
my
low.
friend.
FCM is,
Next one up here,
where's this FCM? at?
Regina, so I don't.
Regina.
Is it Regina?
Yeah,
I think
my
Councillor
sister.
Morrison's volunteering.
Yeah, I went to Saskatoon, it was great.
oh, it was fantastic, yeah. Yeah, they're always good. Anyway, let's move on, folks, to the quarterly financial. It's on the table here, Colin, and
Thanks, Mayor. I just maybe just point out a few things for council. And again, it's been great to have the Tuesday for council, but I also really appreciate the fact that you haven't been too hard on me for kind of pretty regularly missing the deadlines for having the information come out on the Thursday, so I
As long as
appreciate
you get them out
that.
right, they're good. That's the main thing. When we get them, as long as they're right.
Things are moving along as expected and or as budgeted. There a couple things that again, I kind of got my notes on there, but just did want to talk about is that there is a bit of a gap on the budget, in particular on other revenue, and I wanted to again talk about that. And one of the main factors that we have is that we had expected some pretty significant connection fees to go with a couple of developments that we had thought might roll in 2021, and it looks like those will now be moved to 2022. So that's one of the large factors there.
Colin, on that note, before you go any further, it's something I brought up in the past, and, you know, some municipalities have built their bank a little bit on development, and when that development sort of peters out or slows down, then you can be caught a bit flat-footed, and
No, it's
careful with that.
absolutely. And so again, councils have been very prudent. And when we've had some of these boom years, when we get to the end of the year, we've been able to come forward and say, hey, we have a surplus. So we have been putting some money into the development reserve so that if we got into a year where there was no development, that you would sort of be able to, carry your staffing where you're at in a slow period. So I don't see that happening in the real near future, but it's a very good point, and it's valuable to make sure that we're putting something aside to be able to smooth out years where we don't get the revenue we expect. Yeah.
Thank you.
The only other things I guess I wanted to talk about, just again, it's sort of in my notes as well, but wasn't really a surprise, but it is interesting to see where our future goes. And we discussed, as the CAO Cormac did, about trying to get our FireSmart going on. But one thing that really, really hit us hard, because we were heading for pretty much a record year for the campground until the smoke really kind of locked in. Now the smoke kind of locked in about the same time that we became kind of a hot spot for COVID. So there's kind of a combo there. But really we ended up being around the same amount that we earned last year, which is still very good. I mean, but again, last year they also started a month later because of in the 2022, or even a month or so later, and people were not as inclined to travel. So it is interesting that we do some of this work about wildfire and wildfire mitigation, because if we keep having these just totally bogged in summers of smoke, a tourism dollar and helping out with patios is not going to be enough to kind of keep our tourism economy floating, although we may just see more people maybe at the bookends of summer. Maybe that might be another way it operates, but I just thought I would share that. And I'm going to kind of just move on to some capital components. I don't know if anyone's had a chance to go up and see the paving around the lakeside, not the lakeside. Lakeside's supposed to be paved here. They're having some challenges with weather windows, which doesn't surprise anybody, but the Rosemont Park Playground got that paving around, and very nice little connection into Jubilee Manor. So again, it's a little bit late in the year, and that's unfortunate. But even if we get some sunny days, someone can kind of, if that's so challenge, whether it's by a walker or someone taking them out in a wheelchair, they'll be able to enjoy that. So and again, I tip my hat to Rotary for the effort that they continually to do in our community, and in particular the work that they have done with that park. It is really something to see. With the all-age kind of, you've got your bikes, and then you've got your scooters and your skateboards. You got a smaller playground now for the kids, and this seniors and mobility, but just even the pathway. You got your disc golf, and it's really exploded up there. When I think about what sort of that one field that didn't really dry out very well for lots of the year and what's happened to it, it is really special. And I think it's just been a huge benefit to the neighborhood as well. And they were quite concerned when we first started looking at opening up that park, but I think they just really embrace it. When I see how many people are coming over and walking in the neighborhood through it, so I think council should be proud of the work that's happened.
Exceptionally good.
Yeah.
It was a neighborhood that didn't really have an active park in the past, and there's a lot of young families living in the Rosemont area too.
Absolutely. And I did jump, and there was one I forgot to mention. You'll notice transit revenues. Transit revenues did not come back as expected. Now, I think we all kind of got the news a year ago that there was vaccine was sort of, in place, and we thought everything, the world was opening wide. one of the big drivers for our transit system has been the international student. Now, we do have some here, but not at the level, whether it's not being able to travel from India or some of the other communities. So we really seen a real drop in that past revenue going to Selkirk, even though they were successful in getting back onto their in-classroom. So we'll have to see. They've kind of, again, readjusted their numbers when I've seen their budget going forward for 2022 and onwards from BC Transit. So we'll share with that as part of budget. But I just, again, wanted council to be aware that was one of the main drivers. We did talk about it in the second quarter report that this might be a challenge, and we're hoping that we would have an increase in ridership. Now, the other thing that's sort of happening there is that we have a bit of a usage challenge because they kept grade 9s at Trafalgar. And so we're really seeing some of the changeover, and we've had to kind of reroute our buses a bit to do that. And interesting because once you get at LVR and you're grade 11, grade 12, there seems to be a lot more cars sort of driving around. And so you're not riding the bus so much anymore. But so grade 9s and 10s, so you're seeing maybe a little bit lower, but not enough that you would say, oh, well, we can, give a vicinity bus or something there, right? So anyway, it's been an interesting, and I tip my hat to Jerry Tennant and to Jody Kaylee, the graduate transit staff there, on how they've started to stick handle it and work with making sure that we've got our buses at capacity, but we're not leaving people behind. So I don't know if there's any calls on that. So I just wanted.
There's a couple of things I highlighted in this here.
Oh, yes.
And you've touched on a couple of them already, but the one was the transit one. And, it's very interesting because, we have this conversation all the time about transit and the value, and we know what the values are, but if you look at the expenses versus the revenues, that's a heavily subsidized system,
It is, Mayor, except that the component hasn't changed over the last as much. The city itself is in for, now again, that's just for the city component, right? Because we're sort of the sharing. We also have our original district taxes also go in to help out with part of the rides. But when you think about the rides busing system in Nelson itself, it's around 300, between 280 and 300,000 over the past 3 or 4 years. That's the component that you're seeing. I do break out the transit user fee that comes in here, right? But that's the sort of the portion that the local government gets to keep completely. But remember that whatever the cost of the transit operations, yes, exactly. On the operation side, 47% of that cost is covered by the BC Transit, right? So again, there's a grant component that's coming in, and then inside of the remaining 53%, there's a split between regional district and the city because of this shared pie that we have. So it gets complicated, and don't want to, but you're right. But if you were to look at that and say, hey, we're getting $153,000 in transit revenues, but we've got an expense of 1.3. Exactly. But there's a large grant that's coming from the province.
Other than the taxpayer at some point is paying for that somewhere, right?
It's true. True.
But yes. I think, it's important for the public to try and understand, because that's a fixed cost that we have. So that bus is going to run at 9:05 in the morning, full or empty, right? So correct. Those fixed costs are there all the time that drive that.
And council should also be aware too, and I think that they are, that the province mandated across the province that children under 12, and again, trying to get, a family that may not afford a rent here, but maybe is out in the regional district area, if that's maybe getting a bit affordable, but then that becomes problematic for traveling. And so now to have a family that can, have to pay for your adults, but if you've got a group of kids that those ride for free, I think that was a hope there to kind of make that, again, that education and getting a young student, young child to get used to the bus, it becomes the common thing to do, right? That's sort of that change of our culture, change of our routines, and that can make a lifelong change for people, lifelong for transit.
Yeah. So. I'm not sure how.
Until they're in grade 11.
Yeah, well, that's right.
So true. So true.
Transit's uncool at grade 11. That's right.
We had that conversation with Victoria Street. I don't want to drag this out forever, but it's interesting. I don't know how you sell the value of transit. Now, as an example, I've got 3 grandchildren going to Hume School, and I picked them up a couple of times. When I go there, there's got to be, you cannot get parked there if you're not there at least close to a half an hour before the school opens or closes, right? So transit just doesn't work for a lot of people. the school buses there that'll take, your son home, Jesse, to Ridgewood or whatever, but if you're anywhere else in the community, you're not getting home on a bus. And I don't know.
Not as convenient.
Yeah, there's a planning process to it.
Inconveniently. I don't know how that transit actually works
I
around.
think it connects pretty good.
Yeah, we do a good job of.
Bus stop there, but I rarely see a bus
Yeah.
when the school's out. So, just a thought, but the school bus.
Well, we want the kids to play some basketball or on the
Yeah,
gym. They want
that's
some
true, yeah.
activities to see before they go home on the bus and then get home and play video games.
Yeah.
I mean, Mayor, a lot of people too will walk in from that part of town to
Right,
to
exactly,
Hume.
from Fairview. Right.
And there's a lot more bike riding now, especially with electric bikes, and people using actually
Yeah.
the phase one of the bike route. I've seen a lot of that happening too. So I think it's, it is annoying with traffic. It is very, very packed there, but it's a very short
Yeah.
half an hour, and then it's actually pretty empty there.
Yeah. I think where I was
So-
going was, there's no introduction to the bus, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
If you're picking your kid up every day, they don't get introduced to
Yeah.
the transit system, because it works really well.
Yeah, but I think that's also that if you've got the free under 12, that's where
Yeah.
you start to incentivize, right? And get someone to ride with them, whether it's an older sibling or maybe it's a parent if they can, and get them used to riding.
Councillor Page, we are dragging this out.
You guys are having a friendly conversation. I appreciate. Back to business. I had a question, and we probably should have kept Director Spencer around for it, but it just kind of occurs in this conversation. To the hydro, residential revenues being slightly down on the residential and up on residential and down on commercial. I don't know if we've covered this before, or I can't recall having a conversation before about we've gone through COVID. Have we been able to see those trend lines of people being at home versus commercial? And is there a proxy there as how things are going back to normal? Like, are we seeing lower commercial slowly? Is it slowly returning to nominal from before COVID, or?
Yeah, and I can't speak to that fully, and you're right, General Manager Spencer would be the best, but I do know that it was sort of the business portion dropped, but then we had residential pop because everyone was home, right? So you really saw sort of that switch in usage. Now again, rates may have made a difference as far as revenue goes, but that we certainly saw that happening.
Okay.
I think right now we haven't gotten back to a little bit of a norm. Not completely, but that seems to be a bit more balanced. And again, when I look at where we're landing, and the other big thing was we hit our all-time record for demand in February, which again, we always look for ways to lower that because that's what becomes our demand charge from Fortis for a year. So that's another piece that adds to our expenses. Yeah, but we could try to follow up on that, Councillor Page, and maybe get some information about what we've seen from the COVID over the last couple of years.
Well, if I might wonder though what the difficulty would be to agitate out the weather component to get to a number that actually means
value
usage.
Totally.
Right. No, just a worry or wonder.
So Charwood.
Could you just speak to me about the conditional grants and that gap again, please?
Okay, so the
Between actual and budgeted?
budget, yes. So on conditional grants, now before I was speaking about other revenue, when we create that 5-year financial plan,
Yeah.
we had things like we were going to get the grant for the library building, and we were going to get the grant for
Yeah.
these other things. So you need to put that in your plan because that's what you're applying for. But if you don't get them, sometimes this is where you start going, what's going on? We're missing, $6 million sort of thing, right? And that will be the reason. No offsetting expense, but no grant received. So that's sort of where you would see that gap being.
And so that gap is the library, is the toilet at the market. Did that move
No,
to-
we got that ahead of time. So
Okay.
actually some of these, and again, it's quite interesting, great point. On some of the conditional grants this year, the province wanted to get them off, hey, we've done this, and so we've got this money, but we haven't spent it. One would be for the signs, another portion would be for the pier. We've got $1 million for the pier, and we're sort of moving that along, but that's been sitting with us. $700,000 we got for both the signage and the Cottonwood washrooms area work, and so that is sitting there. And usually you have to, they'll give us a draw, but then at the end you got to report and then get the money, so they kind of upfronted it. But definitely a big chunk of that is for the library building. And the other big component we had was the 2 grants we had in for the civic building is in there. And we're still waiting. I think as I noted in below one of the notes that the thought was we would have this information by August, but with the election, that's kind of been pushed off. But we're hoping to hear before the end of the year.
Great. Thank you.
And one big thing too, no surprise, but we had a pretty light winter last year, and you can see that there's some savings there. And again, that's great because I think it could be a place where you put it into some reserves, might help us fund some, the CKIS is coming forward. We've been working with them. They've done some mapping for us. They've got a plan on trying to attack some of the invasive weeds on our own property. And I'm thinking that might be a place, whether it's not weed, and there's a couple of Scotch brooms. I'm learning about this stuff. It's quite fascinating. But I thought that might be a place that if we get there, because one never knows, it could snow for the rest from now until December, and there won't be any money left. We might be asking for more. But if we do end up with that, I'm thinking that might be a place that helps us fund some of those projects and public works that council's been wanting to get going. So just a thought.
Plant a few palm trees and coconut trees and
We could. Well, they might thrive. We could have a banana plantation up here. Yes, it's possible. Yeah.
Councillor Page.
On that topic, we obviously had a discussion, staff and the conversation with the youth center for potentially looking at Hendricks as a native pollinator area. And I'm just wondering, as we look at the invasive species side of things for removal, if we can start to think about potentially having some monies available for native pollinators to replace them, because it's one thing to pull something out, but what does a program look like? And what do the species need to look like? What does the seed look like? How do we distribute that so that we're planting things behind it that means we aren't trying to tear out tansy 3 years later because nothing was put in to replace them.
Councillor Page, you always come up with things. I think that I'm kind of one step ahead of you because I'm learning about weeds and I can use Scotch broom. And now you're throwing in like what should be the things filling it. And I don't know that yet. But what I can tell you,
At least we changed to Tuesday. So if you phone call on a Monday, you know all this stuff.
But what I can say is in meeting right now with Erin Bates from CKIS is the goal I said to come and speak to council. We're working on some budgets and like I said, I have to wait and see what happens here, but bring it forward. But I want her to come and present to council what a plan would be, and I want a multi-year plan. I think the council can, maybe there's a hit on the first year. We got to put some funding aside for the year, following up years, and I'm hoping you can hold those questions for pollinator, and that she'll maybe be able to answer some of that, or whether or not. I'm sure you'll send me a couple of emails of what I might be able to use for doing that. So anyway, but yeah, great questions. But hopefully we'll have a time to discuss that and get in front of it for a spring summer project to work on. So
okay, good.
Yeah. I don't really have anything else I wanted to point out. I don't know if anyone else had highlighted or has any questions.
The only other thing I highlighted here, Colin, was the environmental health services expenses.
Oh, yes.
And I'm always astounded how we can do a better job of recycling and it costs us more money.
Well, yeah, I mean, sometimes it's fascinating. I know, but it's fascinating to think that, whatever was going on with the blue bag system, whether or not people had it in their blue bag and felt that they could, kind of load them all in their garage and then go and do one run with their garbage and recycling. And again, you weren't even supposed to there, but many of us would go there and you would see these blue bags stretched everywhere, even though you at that time you were supposed to take it out and put it into different cycles, but people just sort of thought that. But the amount that we're seeing with the kind of the new system, and I think the cardboard pickup that people don't always follow the rules, and we've got to do a better job of enforcement and working with communications and education. But yes, it's been surprising, and it's also again, shouldn't be a shock, but just more infill housing, another house to go by, another, and then a lot of times because we promoted a suite. So now you've got 2 sets of garbage, you've got a couple laneway house and a couple of blue bins, and we're infilling, and that's having a factor on what we're seeing for collection.
Yeah.
Yep.
I'd say probably the other factor is the RD raising the rates for tipping out at the,
More people are putting in out to the curbside then?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, because now you're paying whatever, $12 or $13 to,
Yeah.
take your material out there, where before it was like $2 or $3
$5, yeah.
or $5, right? So that's probably discouraged some people from feeling that was a cheaper option for them.
I think, you know, one of the really great benefits of the new system we have is you just aren't getting like a pile of garbage, like somebody's garbage bag into recycling, which used to happen, I think, quite frequently, and then it would all be garbage.
Yep.
So with everything being separated.
Contaminated, yeah.
And I also think there's kind of this, you know, people are having to deal with their waste a little bit more and
right.
organize it and think about it. And so I think there's a component of just dealing with some of your waste.
Yeah.
But every time I go down to the transfer station here, or not the transfer station, but the Nelson recycling area, I mean, it is busy.
Oh, yeah.
And I talk to the people who work there, and I mean, they're going flat out. It's really, really busy. So.
Well, and again, Councilor Woodward, you make a great point. So I should have noted that it was easy before, as you said, and again, some of our employees would look at it, and again, you may have thought that you were doing the best thing, and maybe 75% was recycling. And the garbage guys just looked at it and went, just went over in the garbage stream, right? They just crushed it with the garbage. So you didn't know. And so we were working on that with education. But the other component, very difficult now, especially in that blue bag time, you could just throw it out the door and walk away. Well, now you got a person standing there saying, excuse me, sir,
Yeah.
you can't do that. And if you've got a blue bin at home, you can still mix everything, right? If you go to RDCK, you now have to take that out and you got to separate that, right? So there's, again, making it easier and, no change in your expenses.
Yeah.
But if we come and pick it up and and you don't have to do the extra effort of sorting it, that seems to be a key. And we're seeing, some good uptake on recycling, which is great news. Yeah. And I lied, there was two other things I wanted to note. And again, Councilor Page, appreciate this. I guess I don't know, in the library, it doesn't look that big to us, but I didn't realize that we would have 40,000 items that they would be putting through the scanner. So that now that we'll be able to have this self-checkout, it just shocks me when I think about 40,000, like how long it's going to take to put the reading stuff on that. Anyway.
Especially when you can get a lot of the books online.
No, I totally do that. And then just the last one too for the public, because we've been kind of working, and I think we've got a good system going here with this construction manager, Unitech, that's been hired for the pier. We had this RFP out for doing the demolition, and we had thought that the best time to do that would be here in the fall, and they are saying, hey, you know what, we might be better to package this all together, save on mobilization and demobilization of taking them out and then putting the new ones in. So again, great to have somebody looking at this and saying, yes, we know that you want to see some action down there, but better that we do this in a timely fashion, probably more in the spring. So just letting.
So Colin, on that note, then why would pulling them out and putting them in be different anyway?
Well, again,
Because you can't build a deck till you put the new.
no, and I hear you, but there was that kind of conversation that if you're involved in doing that whole thing together, that there's a synergy of making sure that everything is lined up. So that someone just walks away and say, oh, I put the posts and you don't, that's your issue kind of thing, right? That there's like, hey, that's not going to work with what we're building on.
I thought the same guys removed them that put the new ones back in.
It was
also.
about building on them
Top.
after them, right? So who's responsible if they're not in the right place? Now you're trying to put the beam on it and they don't line up and,
Yeah.
right? Or one sinks or whatever, all those things. So that was kind of identified by the architect early on that, having those things not linked might cause some dispute between the different.
The guy that put the foundation in versus the guy putting the
Right.
structure.
Right.
Okay, thank you. Colin, really impressed.
Yep.
Excellent.
Amazing.
And the capital projects, I just don't know how you guys pull them all off, but you do somehow.
Move receipt.
It's amazing. Move receipt by Councillor Woodward, second by Councillor Morrison. All in favour? Carried. Thanks a lot, Colin. Next up is reports. I see the Rusty Moose is still not back on the list. Development Service.
However, as of Monday, someone wants to head down, right?
Potential's there.
It's an expensive beer to have to, to have to pay $300 for the COVID test on the way back, though.
Rusty Moose will no longer be $10, it'll be $300.
Aaron, yeah. KLM and what do you call that cruise ship company there, Janice? Move receipt of the two reports, plan, building and payments. All in favor? Carried, thank you. Minutes. Public Library Board. Got a comment? Move receipt. Okay, Councillor Page, second by Councillor Woodward. All in favor? Thank you. Correspondence and info.
The single one.
Community Futures. Application for a pilot program. West Kootenai Road. Moved by Councillor Charwood, second by Councillor Renwick. All in favor? Thanks. Do you want to speak to that, Councillor Charwood? No.
Nope.
Notice the motion, Councillor Luxembourg's not here, we're okay. Late items, non-in-camera items to release to the public. Resolution to adjourn.
No, we haven't.
Have we one to release to the public?
Oh, yeah,
The library.
the library.
Oh, the appointment of the library. Right.
Library appointments.
Okay.
Yeah, so you saw the end and just went,
Yeah.
running.
Great.
And the name was again? It was appointment to the library board.
There was 3 people that were redone and then a new board member.
I do not.
I know you did.
Hold on to your
Usually
German.
we not do those.
What's that?
Hold on to your German hand.
So that we can-
You gotta hold on a little longer.
Oh, I see, do them at the next meeting?
Yeah, but it's okay, we can do it now, I'm just.
That was on camera,
Okay,
by
so
the way.
we'll be on the next
You were
agenda.
sitting there, I'm like, oh, good, he's got it.
Yeah, let the library
It's all
board,
good.
let the library board tell
Yeah.
people.
Well, that's right, that's why we would normally do it.
That's
Okay,
my
thank you.
understanding.
I'm your guy.
For
Adjournment.
adjournment? Moved. Second by Nicole. All in favor? Carried. Thanks very much, guys.
Thank
Remember
you.
Remembrance Day.
Yes.
Remember.
It's a virtual this year again. However, there's probably room for people to social distance.
There's a real one out in Hairpins. You want to come by to the